Imagine for a moment that everything you know about yourself is just a fraction of what truly exists, as if there were other versions of you, living in different realities, each following a unique path, with experiences, knowledge, and skills that you haven't accessed yet. These versions, which we call the parallel self, are connected to you by an invisible network of consciousness, like different branches of the same tree. But what if you could not only perceive these versions, but also access the knowledge and power they possess? Could it be that what you call you is just a temporary manifestation, limited by the perception of time and space? Perhaps the self you know is just a small part of a much larger being spread across multiple realities, with a consciousness that transcends the barriers of what we consider to be reality. These questions don't have simple answers, but one thing is certain. The more you expand your perception, the more you start to understand that the reality you know is just a superficial layer. When we begin to explore the idea of multiple versions of ourselves, we realize that what happens in one of these realities can directly impact the others. Your parallel self is already living in a reality where the desires you have today have already been achieved. But the question is, how do you access this version? Understanding the existence of these parallel versions can be the first step to unlocking abilities you never imagined you had. And the key to this lies in your ability to perceive time and reality differently, to open your mind to the possibility that the past, present, and future are happening simultaneously, and that you, at this very moment, have the power to connect with a wiser, more experienced, more capable version of yourself. And when you understand this, you can not only access that wisdom, but also bring the accumulated experience of these versions of you into the present. So I ask you, if you could learn from a self that has already achieved what you desire, how would that change your journey? When we open ourselves to this possibility, we begin to see that time and reality are merely tools that can be shaped by our intention and consciousness. And by doing so, we begin to transcend the limits imposed by physical reality. So today, you will discover the true power of your parallel self. Knowing that all your versions coexist, today you will learn not just how to observe your parallel versions, but how to live them. So the question remains, are you ready to discover who you truly are in all your forms? Time, as most of us perceive it, seems to be a constant, uninterrupted, and linear flow. A path that moves from the past, crosses the present, and advances toward the future. But this view of time, this rigid and unchangeable sequence, is just an illusion created by our minds. But what if time, like reality, doesn't follow a fixed pattern? What if, in fact, it can be shaped, bent, and even manipulated by the way we perceive it? The human mind, due to its own perceptual limitations, seeks order in the midst of chaos, and this need for structure results in the creation of linear time. But when you begin to look beyond this mental construct, you realize that time is not a straight line, but a vast ocean of possibilities that coexist simultaneously. It's not a universal constant that flows uniformly for everyone, but a projection of our consciousness. The key to deconstructing this traditional view is to expand your perception of time, understanding that it responds to your internal experience and can be manipulated according to your state of consciousness. Think about it. Have you ever stopped to think about how time seems to drag when you're bored, but flies when you're completely involved in a pleasurable experience? This is the first glimpse that time is malleable, a subjective experience that varies according to our emotions and focus. This is because time is actually an internal construction. It reflects the way we direct our attention and the intensity of our experiences. When we expand our consciousness and stop seeing time as something rigid, we begin to realize that it can be shaped as an instrument to our favor. So, we can say that expanding consciousness is the key that unlocks the true nature of time. Because when you expand your consciousness, your perception of the world changes dramatically. You begin to understand that the present moment is not just a point on the path to the future, but an infinite field where the past, present, and future coexist. And in this field of consciousness, there is not just one reality. There are multiple realities you can access and live, all interconnected. But what determines which reality you experience? Well, I'd say it's your perception. Expanding consciousness is like opening your eyes to a universe where all versions of yourself and all possible realities are already happening, and time is no longer a limiter but a tool for access. When you transcend the linear perception of time, you start to realize that you can jump from one timeline to another, a concept known as quantum jumping. But this jump is not physical, it's mental. It's a movement of your consciousness that allows you to access a version of yourself that already exists in another reality, a version that has already achieved what you seek. Your parallel self, who has already realized what you currently see as just a desire, has already understood the secrets of time and reality, and so lives in an expanded state of consciousness where the barriers between the now and the future don't exist. And when you expand your consciousness, you connect with that version, and what once seemed like a distant goal, something in the future, begins to manifest in the present. This process of accessing the future in the now is what many call quantum jumping. If you see your desires as something that can only be achieved someday, you're putting yourself at the mercy of a linear perception. But when you understand that everything you desire already exists in another reality, accessible through your consciousness, time begins to bend in your favor. In other words, you stop waiting for the future and start bringing that future into the present. This expansion of consciousness not only transforms your perception of time, but also the way you relate to your own reality. The more you expand your mind, the more you realize that you can navigate between different realities and versions of yourself. The wisdom that once seemed unreachable, the results that felt distant, become part of your present. Time, as we know it, collapses, and what remains is an infinite consciousness, capable of experiencing any moment in any reality at any instant. This understanding of the non-linear nature of time opens doors to a level of manifestation where time no longer dictates when or how your desires will be realized. Instead, your consciousness becomes the true agent of change, shaping your experience of time and space according to your will. And it is at this point that the connection with your parallel self becomes clearer. As we discussed before, your parallel self is a version of yourself that exists in an alternative reality and has already learned to navigate time and dimensions in a way that you may not yet fully understand. This version of you has already experienced the challenges you face now and found solutions, achieved the goals you so desperately want, and most importantly, understands how time can be used as a resource rather than a barrier. Your parallel self is an advanced manifestation of your own essence. It represents a version of you that has transcended the limitations imposed by the linear perception of time and space. Imagine that while you experience reality in a sequential way, one moment after the other, your parallel self has already discovered that all realities coexist. For this version of you, there is complete freedom to interact with the various realities available. It's as if your parallel self lives in a state of expanded consciousness, where every choice, every experience has already been lived and understood in ways that you're only just beginning to explore. The more you